So guys, straight after the Eubank versus Nick Blackwell fight last night, I did like a initial reactions video, sort of an instant thoughts video. Lasted about 5 minutes, was a very brief run through of the fight. Didn't really have time to collect my thoughts, etc. I started to record the video pretty instantaneously after the doctor waved the fight off. So, as you probably guessed if you watched the video, it was recorded before I knew what had become of Nick Blackwell. We still don't know what the full situation with Nick Blackwell is, but we understand that he's in a medically induced coma. There's varied reports out there saying that he has a bleed to the brain or a bleed to the skull. Clearly he's in a very serious condition, and not that it means much, but my thoughts are with him, and hopefully he is able to make a full recovery and go on to live a normal life in whatever field he chooses that to be in. He's a young man. Hopefully he can, it's not too late for him to start a career. He's a likeable guy, a nice guy. Thoughts are with him, and hopefully he can get over this and make a full recovery, as I say. In this particular video, I want to discuss various elements of what happened last night in more detail. I want to discuss my thoughts on the stoppage. I want to discuss my thoughts on why Chris Eubank Jr was as successful in the fight as he was. And he was very successful. I mean, people give the Sky commentators a lot of stick. The Channel 5 commentators deserved an equal amount of stick last night, let me tell you. At one point, and forgive me if I'm slightly wrong here, but I believe after 7 rounds, they had this fight scored 68-66. I was sat watching with my father and my brother. I think my father had it 7-0, I had it 6-1. And my brother had it 6-1 as well, I think. And they scored it 68-66 somehow after the 7 rounds. So the Sky commentators deserve just as much stick. The Channel 5 commentary team deserve just as much stick as we usually give the Sky commentary team. So let's have that right. So wanted to discuss the stoppage. Wanted to discuss why Chris Eubank Jr was successful, and I wanted to discuss whether Chris Eubank Jr has shown improvement that makes me believe he will be able to make the step up to world level against Billy Joe Saunders or against other world championship type fighters. So I've made a few notes, a few different things I wanted to discuss, so apologies if I'm doing this and looking down. It's just because I want to make sure I express myself in the way I intend to and get out a few points that I need to. Chris Eubank Jr, let me start by saying, offensively, is a very good fighter. I mean, it's not that we didn't know that before this fight, but offensively he's a very good fighter. That uppercut he throws is a real weapon, and people don't seem to be able to deal with it. It amazes me how anyone can fight Chris Eubank Jr and not have developed a plan to deal with that uppercut. Let me tell you, if it was announced that I was fighting Chris Eubank Jr in 8 weeks' time, or a fighter that I was working with was fighting Chris Eubank Jr in 8 weeks' time, one of the most major parts of a training camp would be dealing with an uppercut. How are you going to deal with that uppercut? How are you going to negate it? How are you going to defend against it? How are you going to counter it? Because these guys, Spike O'Sullivan, Nick Blackwell, others before, they seem to have no idea what to do when he's throwing that uppercut. And for me, it's as obvious as coming up with a plan of how to deal with a Vladimir Klitschko straight right or a Floyd Mayweather lead left hook. This uppercut is becoming synonymous with Chris Eubank Jr. It's a real danger. It's a real weapon in the division. And guys need to wake up to it. Guys need to come up with a plan of how to deal with it. He's got 2 uppercuts though. And this is why I was a bit critical of him being inaccurate in my initial video yesterday. So let me go into that in a bit more detail. Chris Eubank Jr., as I see it, has two distinct uppercuts. He's got one, which is an A-star 10 out of 10 punch, which is when he's up in the pocket, he'll lean on you, he'll do something really smart with his shoulder. What he'll do is he'll lean on you, sort of push out an angle to create the space, and then smack an uppercut in, like a real short uppercut on the inside, having sort of got up in your chest and then created the space with his shoulder. You know, it's excellent inside in the pocket type fighting. He's also got a long uppercut, kind of reminiscent of the punch Terry Flanagan landed on Diego Magdaleno in their fight. And this punch is nowhere near as effective. This is the kind of, I'll exaggerate it for the purpose, but it's a kind of a long, long sort of looping type punch, and he often wings it up like this, And this is the one that makes him look a bit wild and madly inaccurate, because that one's a lot easier to guard against, because if you just got a high guard relatively tight, this uppercut will kind of brush off your arms and go up into the air, and that's what I'm referring to when I'm saying Eubank Jr. is still inaccurate. He's a bit inaccurate with his hooks, and he's a bit inaccurate with that long uppercut, and it's the long uppercut that fighters don't seem to have as many problems with. It's actually that inside in the pocket short uppercut that fighters are really struggling with. And part of me wonders, is that to do with the way he positions himself on the inside and uses his shoulder so well and moves people around with his strength and his size at the weight, Part of me wonders whether or not that's the case. But offensively, let's put it that way, he's a really, really good fighter. He's actually got quite a good jab, Chris Eubank Jr. He doesn't use it very well, but he's got a very good jab. His jab is fast, it's snappy, it's got sting to it. He doesn't work off it though. He seems to jab more for the sake of it than to actually use it as a weapon. He doesn't really jab to the body as much as I'd like. He doesn't really double up his jab as much as I'd like. He never really sort of throws the jab and then throws straight off it. He's more just jabbing for jabbing's sake. And his jab's good, but I think he could develop his jab into a real weapon. Because I don't think at present it's as big a threat to as an opponent as it should be, because it's a very, very, very good jab. Let's talk about him. So offensively, he's very good. He's clearly not the biggest puncher in the world in terms of a one-punch knockout artist. But what he is a fast, spiteful, aggressive puncher with a full range of punches, who will throw combinations of 20 or 30 punches. So despite the fact that he's not a huge one-punch knockout artist, that won't mean that he doesn't have a high knockout ratio. He's just going to knock people out legs. He's going to wear them down. He's going to grind them down. He's going to injure them, beat them into submission. In a sense, it's a more cruel way of winning a fight. Would it have been kinder for Nick Blackwell if he'd been in there with Golovkin last night? Yeah, Golovkin hits a lot harder, but if Golovkin had knocked Nick Blackwell out, in a couple of rounds, arguably that's, I'm just saying, that's the kind of fighter that Chris Eubank is. He's someone who grinds and wears and, really puts it on you continuously, and he's a difficult man to beat. I'll tell you, a difficult man to beat with that, because he's relentless and he's spiteful in there. He punches with bad intentions. As for his defence, a lot of people pointing out he's got very good head movement, and I can't deny that. Good head movement. He's obviously got strong reflexes. When he was up against the ropes, he was moving very well up against the ropes, I must say. He was going low, he was moving his head a lot, bending, dipping, weaving, all of those nice stuff when he was up against the ropes. His head movement was real good. And this is how I'd like to split down his defence. I'd say again, like his uppercut is in two parts, so is his defence. As we know, Eubank Jr is a guy who fights in spurts. He'll pour it on you for 90 seconds of a round, and then he'll take 90 seconds off. And in the 90 seconds he'll take off, he'll be quite defensively aware, because when he's not attacking you, he realises this is the part of the round he's got to be defensively aware. Where he's actually defensively flawed and defensively frail is in the part of the fight where he is not in a defensive mode. He's actually defensively flawed whilst he is engaging. He is at his most vulnerable when he is actually at the height of his pomp, attacking opponents. We've seen this in the Spike O'Sullivan fight, where Spike was able to land haymakers on it. We actually saw it in the Nick Blackwell fight, where he was getting so overconfident and he was doing so well, he started playing to the crowd, showboating, and essentially got countered, got timed. When he's throwing, an elite counterpuncher, an elite boxer, is going to be able to have success on him. To put it simply, it's nothing more complicated than that. His hands just aren't in the right place. His hands aren't guarding his face. I can't put it in any more simple terms. When Chris Eubank Jr. is engaging, when Chris Eubank Jr. is offensively minded, when he is in destroyer mode, his hands are not protecting his face. It is as simple as that. All of this head movement stuff, all of this defensive stuff is great, but you only see that when he's taking time off. You don't see any of that when he's in the middle of engaging and when an opponent is trying to counter him, which may be a weakness for him against the elite level boxers, because a world championship fighter is not going to let him have it as much of his own way. You can't walk up to a Gennady Golovkin and land a 30-punch combination with wild hooks and uppercuts. You can't. Their timing's too good. Their defence is too good. You have to expect to get something back. And this is what I talk about when I talk about the slightly flawed Chris Eubank Jr. defence. I know at the initial glance people may think he's got a good defence because he's doing all the flashy Roy Jones head movement and ducking and diving and that sort of stuff. And yeah, there's a place for that. But you've also got to do the very basics right. And it's got to be that when you are throwing a jab, you bring your jab hand back to protect your chin. And that's the bit he's not doing. He's doing the complicated stuff well. He's not doing the defensive basics as well as he should have done. It hasn't cost him so far. He looks like he's got a good chin, but he was wobbled slightly against Spike. Whether I'd say he was wobbled against Nick Blackwell or not, I don't know. But he was caught hard by Nick Blackwell last night. Let's put it that way. Nick Blackwell was able to land him with a haymaker or so. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. As I say, I think I gave Nick Blackwell 1 round in this fight. Eubank Jr. put on a dominant performance. The question I'm thinking here is how is he going to move from world level to British level? Sorry, how is he going to move from British level to world level? And I'm going to discuss that precise move in just 1 second. But before I do, I just want to say a brief piece on Blackwell. Yeah, he performed with great heart, great spirit, great courage. Real warrior. Deserves all the credit and respect he's going to get off the back of that performance. And we hope that he's able to make a full recovery and won't be any the worse for what happened last night. But when he had Eubank Jr. up against the ropes, when Eubank was taking the time off, Eubank's head movement was very, very tricky at that point. What Blackwell, and what he definitely needed to do was go to the body a bit. I guess it's an old saying in boxing, but the head was moving all angles, but the body doesn't move. You can't move your stomach, your solar plexus like you can move your head. Now, if Nick Blackwell had, every time he got Chris Eubank Jr. up against the ropes, if he'd hit him twice to the body, just jabbed him twice to the body, not only would it have been 100 scoring punches to Chris Eubank Jr., but who knows, this was an immensely stamina-sapping fight. Could that have affected Chris Eubank Jr. later on in the fight if he'd have had to have taken 100 jabs to the stomach? I don't know. I'm just speculating here. What I'm saying is that Chris Eubank Jr. was very elusive against the ropes. Blackwell expended a lot of energy punching air and not doing much damage to Chris Eubank Jr. After 2 or 3 times like that, he should have realised that the wild hooks when Eubank Jr. was up against the ropes weren't working, and instead just bank double jabs to the chest or to the solar plexus, just scoring punches. You know, that's a good thing. I mean, in terms of defence, you know, Blackwell's defence, it was in the first round, I thought he had good basic defence. You know, his hands were high, they were tight. You know, he had a sort of tight guard. The problem was that whilst his tight guard was okay, there was nothing more to him defensively than that tight guard. He was standing quite square on. You know, there wasn't any. He didn't give him any angles, and because of that, he was quite easy when Eubank was putting his shoulder in and creating a bit of space and creating room for the uppercut. It was quite easy just to pepper Blackwell, and that's why we saw him broken nose, hurt eye, you know, bloodied face. Was just because that punch was able to land over and over and over again. You know, you look at Blackwell being so squared on, and you just think, if he'd have been a bit more, you know, shoulder up, if he'd have been a little bit more to the side, you know, if he'd have had a bit more backwards head movement, you know, you look at Tyson Fury, sometimes you see shoulder come up, head go back, you know, if you make yourself a target like that, it's impossible just to land 50 uppercuts, you know, straight like that. You know, it's much harder to hit the target, whereas Eubank Jr. couldn't really miss with the uppercut last night. You know, and people are very critical of his corner and saying they should have pulled the fight out earlier. And for me, the real criticism of his corner is, how did you let him get through a training camp without discussing how you're going to deal with the uppercut? I think that's the bigger criticism. You know, as for the stoppage, look, with the benefit of hindsight, of course it should have been stopped earlier. I'm not going to sit here and say the fight shouldn't have been stopped. That'd be mad. The fight should have been stopped earlier, because we know what has now happened to Nick Blackwell, and maybe that wouldn't have happened if he had been stopped when Chris Eubank Jr. was flurrying on him in the 6th round, or the 7th round, I think it was. What I would say though is it would have been a hard call to stop the fight at that point in my mind. Chris Eubank Jr. was well ahead on my card, but the rounds were competitive. Blackwell was landing, you know, he was landing sporadically on Chris Eubank Jr. with decent punches. And I guess Blackwell's image as a sort of ultra fit, ultra durable guy who often comes on late probably didn't help in this occasion, you know. I guess people, maybe the referee was expecting him to be behind and knowing that Blackwell would rally late in the fight. So, you know, whilst of course the fight should have been stopped earlier, I'm not going to be overcritical of his referee, or sorry, his corner or the referee for not pulling the fight. You know, it's a tragic set of things, but it's I don't want to say it's anyone's fault what happened. I think it's too easy to apportion the blame to one particular person. You know, you've got the fighter, you've got the referee, you've got the corner, you've got the doctor at ringside. And essentially Blackwell was still in the fight. I know it sounds bizarre, I haven't watched the fight back, but there's one round where I actually score it to Blackwell. I think I might have scored him the 7th round or the 8th round, something, or maybe it was the 6th round. Let's say I score him one round between 6 and 8, because Chris Eubank Jr. appears to take a round off, because he's you know, as a rest round, if you like, because he's well ahead. And you know, Nick Blackwell was able to pick up a round on my scorecard. So it's easy to say it should have been stopped, but it's also easy to see how it wouldn't have been stopped, you know, with the stage this was on and with how much it meant to both fighters. So, you know, whilst of course it should have been stopped earlier, and it's highly unfortunate it wasn't, I'm not going to sit here and give criticism to the corner team or to the referee for not stopping it. I can understand how that would have happened, given the nature of the event, and you know, I'm sure everyone feels bad enough and guilty enough this morning without people on Twitter having their opinions anyway. Apologies for the lighting effect. As you can probably tell, there's a window directly in front of me, and the blind is doing its best to keep the sun out, but slightly failing. So I'll carry on despite the fact I'm probably looking like a blue zebra or striped animal, insert striped animal of choice. Anyway, let's talk about Eubank Jr. stepping up to world level. And I appreciate this is a longer video, so I'll try not to ramble on for too much longer. I hope you guys don't mind the longer video. But the question is, Eubank Jr. is now a very proven fighter at British level. You know, we've seen him beat Spike O'Sullivan, we've seen him beat Nick Blackwell, who are two good British level boxers, and he's run through both of those guys. Can he make the move up from that level to a potential rematch with Billy Joe Saunders? And whilst I wouldn't rule him out completely, for me the answer to that question is definitely still no. Let me rephrase that. To me the answer to that question is probably no. Probably no. I'm not going to say definitely no. Probably not. And I've said this lots of times before, but the reason is that Chris Eubank Jr. has improved, definitely. But I'm still unsure whether he's improved in the areas that he came up short against Billy Joe Saunders. Because the reason Billy Joe Saunders was so effective was his timing and his accuracy with the jab. And that southpaw jab that was landing on Chris Eubank, that Chris Eubank couldn't really deal with so effectively. You know, for me, I'm yet to see that Chris Eubank Jr. can be defensively responsible whilst having offensive output. And I think Billy Joe Saunders will highlight that and will be able to steal rounds off him due to that. I also think that Chris Eubank Jr. is a guy who is incredibly reliant on setting his feet. You know, we all know when Eubank's at his most effective. It's when he's standing in front of an opponent, unloading. Now, Nick Blackwell, for all his strengths, is not a sophisticated amateur. He's not a sophisticated mover. You know, a guy like Billy Joe Saunders is going to be moving a lot more. You know, southpaw guy, getting low. We didn't see, you know, he's giving all sorts of angles. He's not going to be standing there in an orthodox stance, coming straight forward, standing straight on Chris Eubank Jr. and having it out with him a foot away. That's not Billy Joe's style. And that takes away a lot of the strength from Chris Eubank Jr. A guy like Billy Joe is awkward as hell. Catching Billy Joe is like trying to catch a bar of soap in the bath, you know. He's slippery as hell. And that means you can't simply stand there and unload your 30-punch combination of hooks without anything coming back. I mean, sure, you might get a couple of hooks in, but then he's gone. And he's peppering you with jabs. And if you're a little bit slow when you throw a punch, or a little bit wide or inaccurate when you throw a punch, and you're going to be even wider and more inaccurate against a guy like Billy Joe, because he's a moving target, as you're being wide, as you're being inaccurate, you're getting peppered with jabs. So for me, Eubank's defensive frailty remains a concern against an elite level boxer. His reliance on setting his feet is a concern. He looks very good against stationary guys like Chudinov, Spike and Blackwell. Will he be so good against the mover? Yeah, for me that's a major concern. The inaccuracy is not as bad as it was, but some of it remains, which is a dream for a sort of counter-punching boxer style fighter, like a Billy Joe Saunders. And just don't believe that every punch he landed on Nick Blackwell would have been landed on a Billy Joe Saunders. I appreciate Billy Joe Saunders gassed badly in their last fight and maybe was slightly defensively inept himself in the latter rounds of their fight, but you know, don't assume that Billy Joe Saunders would stand there square on and just allow himself to be uppercutted 15 times in the face. You know what Billy Joe's like. You know he's got his shoulder up. You know he's changing angles and changing zones. It's a completely different ball game. Eubank Jr. is an absolute wrecking ball if you allow him to fight the fight he wants to fight. Is he as good a fighter when taken out of his comfort zone? I'm not sure. And I'm just not sure this run of opponents, Chudinov, Blackwell, Spike, how any of them have the style to beat Eubank Jr. They're all Tough guys, hard men, strong fighters. None of them are movers. None of them are defensive experts. None of them are in any way slick. They're brawlers. They're guys who are scrappers. You know, these type of opponents will play into Eubank's hands. And whilst Eubank has improved, I still question whether he's improved enough to beat an elite level boxer. And for me, Billy Joe Saunders at this stage is an elite level boxer. The truth is, people don't like Billy Joe Saunders. They view him as a light puncher. They view him as a big mouth. And both of those things may or may not be true. But the question you've got to ask is, if Chris Eubank Jr. can't land those uppercuts and hooks on Billy Joe Saunders, if Chris Eubank Jr. has to chase Billy Joe Saunders outside of the ring, around the ring, without setting his feet, and if Chris Eubank Jr. still doesn't seem to be able to block any punches when he's engaging himself, can he actually beat Billy Joe Saunders? You know? And for me, we still need to see more from Chris Eubank Jr. before that fight gets made. My suspicion is that that fight will get made next time out. You know, I know Saunders is talking a Golovkin fight. I think that's a smokescreen. I think they're wanting to show Team Eubank they've got other options. For me, Eubank versus Blackwell, such a big fight. Undoubtedly a pay-per-view fight, one of the biggest fights in England. It's going to be massive money for both men. I'm sure it could be well into the 7 figures for both men. It's the biggest fight out there for both men in terms of hype, in terms of credibility, popularity. It's a fight that both men will think they can win. Surely it's the biggest money fight out there for both men. It could sell a hell of a lot of tickets. That could sell a hell of a lot of pay-per-view buys. Why would you risk getting demolished by a guy like Golovkin when you could fight a guy you know you're relatively well matched against? I think that one happens next, and at this stage I'd be rolling with Billy Joe Saunders to win the fight. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on everything we've discussed last night. The stoppage, the way the fight broke down, Chris Eubank Jr.'s upside, whether he'll get to world level or not. Am I right about his frailties? Am I right about his strengths? I'm interested to discuss. If you've enjoyed this video, do hit the thumbs up button. Please do subscribe to the channel if you're new. Many thanks for watching.